February of 1891. For 8 days, the Little Missouri Breaks had disappeared under snow. Not fallen snow, driven snow. Snow that moved sideways in white walls, snow that filled wheel ruts, swallowed fences, and made every familiar trail look like blank earth under a burial cloth. By the 8th morning, the wind finally weakened enough for men from Painted Coulee to move. 3 of them came up the ridge with shovels, ropes, and the kind of silence people carry when they expect to find bodies. At the end of the ridge sat a low stone house, sunk into the side of a clay bank, half wall, half hill. All winter, neighbors had laughed at it. They called it the root cellar. They said no Christian family could live inside something built like a grave. And after 8 days of killing cold, most of them believed the joke had turned true. The men reached the door. No tracks, no smoke they could see, no sound except wind dragging snow against stone. Then something moved inside. A dog barked once. The latch lifted, and the door opened. Warm air rolled out into the blue cold. Not a weak breath of heat from a dying stove. A steady, living warmth. The men stood there with their shovels in their hands. Inside, a boy was wrapped in a quilt eating fried potatoes from a tin plate. An old woman sat near a table, mending wool by lamplight. A black kettle breathed quietly beside a low fire. And Silas Mercer, the man everyone had mocked, only looked at the men in the doorway and said, "Step in, or you'll let the weather spend what took all night to save." That was the first time Painted Coulee understood the truth. The house they had mistaken for a grave had become the only house winter could not empty. But that door had begun opening long before the storm. It began a year earlier in a log cabin that looked ordinary from the road and failed in every ordinary way. Silas Mercer was 39 then, a widower with a face weather had sharpened and grief had hollowed out. His wife, Mary, had died the previous March after fever took hold too quickly for any doctor to reach their claim. Their second child, a daughter who never drew a full breath, was buried beside her under a cottonwood cross east of the yard. Silas did not speak of that grave often. He did not have to. Every time winter came down from the north, he thought of it. In the cabin with him lived his mother-in-law, Ruth Bell, stiff in the hands but sharp in the eyes, his 7-year-old son, Caleb, and a brindled sheepdog named Patch. The cabin itself was like hundreds scattered across the frontier, cottonwood logs, mud chinking, a plank door, a stove that glowed red when the weather was gentle, and still somehow failed when the weather turned serious. Cold found the house the way water finds a crack. It slid under the door. It came through old chinking. It rose through gaps in the floor. Some mornings, Ruth woke with her shawl drawn over her mouth because her breath had frozen in pale threads along the blanket edge. Caleb slept closest to the stove and still woke with cold fingers. Patch abandoned his corner and pressed himself against the ashes. Silas noticed all of it. But he did not complain. He counted. Every armload of wood, every hour the stove held a coal, every time the room near the door fell below freezing while the stovepipe still burned hot enough to snap. He wrote the numbers in a small black ledger, not because numbers comforted him, because they did not lie. By the end of that winter, the ledger had said what pride would not. The cabin did not need a hotter fire. It needed fewer ways to lose the fire it already had. One night in April, after Caleb had gone to bed and Ruth was turning sock heels by the lamp, Silas opened a trunk that had belonged to his father. Ephraim Mercer had been a mason before the war, then a builder of smokehouses, spring houses, ice pits, and root rooms for people who understood that survival was often less about strength than storage. The trunk smelled of old cedar and dust. Inside were a chalk line, a cracked square, a brass plumb bob, and a packet of notes tied with butcher string. Silas untied them carefully. Most of the pages were plain working observations. Stone drinks slow. Earth steals slow. Low ceilings keep what high roofs waste. Vent what the body spoils, but do not vent what the fire earns. Then he found one line underlined twice. Heat is not made once. It is either kept or lost every minute after. Silas read that line until the lamp burned low. The next morning he walked north of the claim to a clay cut below a line of badlands stone. No one in Painted Coulee would have chosen it for a house. The ground was tight, the slope was awkward, there was no pretty view. But the bank faced away from the worst north wind, and the hill behind it carried more shelter than any timber wall on the prairie. So that was where Silas drove the first stake. By May, people had noticed. While other men reset fence posts and patched roofs, Silas hauled stone. Flat sandstone from the break, heavy limestone from a dry creek bottom, slick blue clay in buckets. Lime burned in a crude pit until his eyes watered and his hands cracked. He dragged the stone on a rawhide sled behind an old mule named Sunday, then stacked it in growing piles beside the cut bank. One afternoon, Amos Pike stopped his wagon in the road and watched him wrestle a slab into place. Amos had a fine stove, a broad house, and the loud confidence of a man who mistook size for wisdom. He nodded at the hole in the bank. "Building Mary a second grave, Silas?" The words hung there. Ruth, who had come out with a water pail, went still. Silas did not turn around. He set the stone. Then he reached for the next one. By supper, the nickname had already traveled. The root cellar. That was what Painted Coulee called it. The root cellar, the cave house, the widower's grave. Silas let them talk. He had learned that laughter cost less than firewood. Stone cost labor, and labor, at least, could be stored. All summer, the house rose slowly. Not upright like a proud frame house, inward, downward, into the hill. Silas dug until loose topsoil gave way to hard-packed clay and old stone. He set a footing wider than any neighbor thought reasonable. Then he began laying walls thick enough that a man had to reach across them, not lean over them. At the base, the west wall was nearly 30 inches thick. At shoulder height, 22. The north wall sank 4 feet back into the bank, with packed clay behind stone and a drainage run below it so spring water could not press straight into the sleeping room. The building was narrow by design, 12.5 feet across, 24 feet long. No grand parlor, no wasted corners. The hearth sat near the center, backed by a heavy heat wall of dense fieldstone. The sleeping end was lower and tighter. The door faced southeast, where morning sun could reach it when the weather allowed. To the road, it looked foolish. To Silas, it was arithmetic. Small room, thick wall, low roof, earth behind, mass inside, less air to heat, less heat to lose. Every evening he wrote in the ledger, wall thickness, mortar mix, wind direction, which stones stayed cool after sunset, which stones kept warmth after a day in the sun. He was not building a monument. He was building a place where warmth would have to work hard to escape. Then the first failure came. In late June, after 4 days of dry heat, the south corner split. Not wide, not disastrous, but visible. A seam of mortar cracked almost 3 feet along the outer face, where the lime and clay had skinned over before the inner bed cured. Amos Pike heard before breakfast. By noon, he was standing at the worksite with 2 other men, smiling at the crack as if it had confessed for him. "Stone's too stubborn for this country," he said. "Told you that bank wanted to bury the place." Silas ran his thumb along the damaged seam. He saw the mistake. Too much clay, too much sun, too little shade while curing. A prideful man might have packed the crack and hidden it. Silas got the hammer. He took down the corner, stone by stone, a week of labor reduced to a pile on the ground. He did not explain. He did not defend himself. He remixed the mortar, shaded the fresh work with burlap, and laid the corner again. By sunset, Amos had another joke. Silas had a stronger wall. The difference mattered more than the joke, because Winter would not ask who had sounded clever in June. Winter would only test what had been left weak. In July, another warning came from a man who did not laugh. Jasper Bell, Ruth's younger brother, was a carpenter who had built 3 barns and more doors than any man in Painted Coulee could count. He stood beside the unfinished house for nearly an hour, saying nothing. Then he walked inside and looked at the stone. "You'll keep heat," Jasper said. Silas waited. Jasper pointed toward the sleeping end. "But you'll keep damp, too. Cooking steam, wet boots, breath, laundry. 4 souls in a low room all winter. If it cannot breathe, this place will sweat itself sick." That night, Silas opened a new page in the ledger. Air, moisture, smoke. He did not treat Jasper's warning as an insult. A warning from a man who understood material was not resistance. It was a tool. Over the next 2 weeks, Silas changed the design. A narrow draw vent went high near the hearth wall. A lower intake tunnel ran under a stone bench near the door, baffled against wind. The sleeping end received a small, closable throat set above head height, too narrow to dump heat, wide enough to let spoiled air leave when the stove was active. None of it looked heroic. That was the point. The most important parts of survival rarely do. By August, the walls had reached roof height. Silas laid short cottonwood beams across the span, then brush, then clay, then sod cut from the pasture in tight squares. The roof looked like prairie had grown over a house by accident. The hearth came next, a low firebox, a deep stone back, a flue that rose from the hillside like a blunt finger of masonry. When the chimney dried, Silas lit the first hard test fire. At first, it worked. The fire caught clean, the smoke pulled upward. Ruth watched from the doorway with her arms folded. Caleb sat on an empty lime barrel, eyes bright. Then the wind shifted down the cut bank. The draft reversed. Smoke rolled back through the throat in a gray sheet. Ruth coughed until her eyes streamed. Caleb stumbled outside with Patch barking at his heels. The room filled faster than Silas could kill the flame. For the first time, the house did not look stubborn. It looked dangerous. That night, Silas did not sleep. He sat outside with the ledger open on his knees while moonlight lay over the unfinished sod roof. The house had not failed because stone was wrong. It had failed because the hill changed the wind. So the chimney rose again, 2 feet higher, then another foot. Silas built a shoulder of stone around the windward side and cut the throat narrower at the base, so the draft would move faster when it began. 3 evenings later, he tested again. The wind came down the bank. The flame leaned. The smoke hesitated. Then it climbed. Silas watched until the fire burned clean and steady. He wrote only 5 words in the ledger. Draft held under North Sheer. By September, the root cellar was livable. Not pretty, not fashionable, not what any woman in Painted Coulee would brag about over church coffee. The windows were small, the door was heavy, the ceiling was low enough that Amos Pike had to duck when he stepped inside, and pretended he had come only to inspect the foolishness. But when Ruth moved her chair into the far corner on the first cool evening, she did not move it back toward the hearth. That was the first sign. A small fire at dusk warmed the stones slowly. After the flames sank to coals, the room did not fall away into cold the way the old cabin had. It eased down, gently, like a bank account being drawn from slowly instead of robbed all at once. Silas recorded the overnight readings. Outside, 28. Near the door, 46. Beside the heat wall, 53. Not comfort by city standards, but on the prairie, before winter, it was proof. The second sign came from Patch. In the old cabin, the dog had always slept with his nose nearly in the ashes. In the new house, he chose the center of the floor. Animals had no pride to protect. They simply went where the truth was. By October, the neighbors had stopped asking whether Silas would finish. Now they asked whether he would regret finishing. A stone house, they said, would freeze solid once real cold settled into it. A sod roof would leak. The bank would push moisture through the north wall. The vents would turn into ice. The chimney would choke. Silas heard all of it and kept making small corrections. He lifted the bunks off the wall by 6 inches. He built a willow screen behind the sleeping shelves so air could sit still there without trapping cloth against cold stone. He raised the drying rack closer to the warm roofline and kept wet boots on a slate tray near the door. When he saw a faint line of moisture form behind Caleb's bed after a hard frost, he did not ignore it. For 4 nights, he measured where the damp appeared, when it disappeared, how warm the room had been, how long the vent stayed open. Then he shifted the bed, opened the high throat a thumb's width when cooking, and added a thin interior plank panel over the coldest reach of stone. The damp vanished. Jasper Bell came to look and found no triumph in Silas's face, only attention. That made Jasper uneasy. Most men wanted to be right. Silas wanted the house to be right. Those were not the same thing. In early November, the first true test arrived. A night of hard cold. No storm. No emergency. Only 6 degrees below zero before dawn, and enough wind to make every crack announce itself. Across Painted Coulee, stoves were fed after midnight, then again before 3, then again before sunrise. Silas loaded the hearth at 9, let the flames take, then closed the door to a narrow breath. At midnight he woke and did not rise. That felt like disobedience. By morning, the coals still glowed under ash. Outside, 6 below. Inside, 48 near the door, 57 beside the heat wall. Ruth had slept without waking. Caleb's hands were warm under the quilt. Patch did not move until breakfast. Silas entered the numbers. Then he cut more wood. Proof did not excuse preparation. It demanded more of it. The old trapper Eli Hask rode through on the 13th of November. Eli had one blind eye, a beard like river weed, and an instinct for weather that made even proud men listen. He stopped near the root cellar and did not laugh at it. He looked at the sky. He looked at the dry grass lying too flat. He looked at a ring of ice already forming inside a water barrel before sunset. Then he said, "This season's coming with teeth." No sermon, no drama, just the statement of a man who had learned that storms introduce themselves in small ways before they take the room. After he rode off, Silas walked the house. Door hide, hinges, vent shutters, chimney shoulder, drainage cut, wood stack, salt, flour, beans, dried apples, water jars stored where they would not freeze. He checked everything twice. Ruth watched him from the hearth. "You think it will be that bad?" Silas looked toward Caleb, asleep with one arm over the dog. "I think bad only needs one thing missed." That was the sentence he carried into December. The storm began on the second day of the month. It did not arrive like a single blow. It arrived like a lock being closed. First came fine snow, almost harmless. Then wind. Then hard snow riding the wind so low that it seemed to scrape the ground rather than fall from the sky. By the second day, wagon tracks vanished. By the third, fences became low white humps. By the fourth, shallow wells froze under their covers, and hens died in their boxes. The thermometer outside Barnabas Vale's store went to 32 below zero before the glass clouded with frost. Then it kept falling. Painted Coulee had known winter. This was something colder than weather. It was an audit. Every loose door, every proud roofline, every cracked chink, every woodpile judged sufficient in October. The storm found them one by one and charged interest. Amos Pike felt it first. His house was larger than Silas's old cabin and built from better timber. It also had more air to heat, more wall to leak, and a stove he had trusted too much. At the start, Amos fed it every 2 hours, then every hour, then whenever the room seemed to sag toward cold, which was almost always. The stove roared. The pipe shivered. The ceiling grew hot enough to make a man sweat if he stood on a chair. But near the floor, the cold stayed patient. His wife stuffed rags beneath the door. His eldest boy tacked feed sacks over a window. Still the warmth climbed, slipped, and left. By the 5th day, Amos stopped burning logs and started burning judgment. A split stool, a broken crate, the railing from the back steps. Each piece made a flame. None of it made the house keep heat. At the schoolhouse, Nora Bale tried to shelter 6 children whose families were trapped on outlying claims. The iron stove in the corner glowed orange. Still, the ink on her desk thickened to black paste. She moved the children closer, then closer. By evening, they sat in a tight half-circle with blankets over their knees while the far wall gathered frost in fern shapes. At Barnabas Vale's store, people crowded between sacks of flour, barrels of nails, and shelves of cloth. A larger room should have been a blessing. Instead, it became a debt. Too many seams, too many windows, too much air. The woodpile behind the store shrank into nothing but bark and chips. No one in Painted Coulee lacked fire. That was the cruel part. Every chimney smoked. Every stove ate. Every family knew how to make heat. What they did not know was how to keep it from leaving. Meanwhile, under the clay bank, Silas Mercer did not build a bigger fire. He built the same fire he had practiced. Morning. 2 split logs. A bed of coals opened, fed, and settled. Door closed. Vent cracked only enough to keep the room honest. Evening. 2 more logs. The stone behind the hearth took warmth slowly, almost stubbornly. The floor took it slower. The earth behind the wall took the edge from the cold before it could bite through. Air warmed quickly, Stone remembered. That was the difference. Air could be bullied by wind. Stone had to be persuaded. By the fifth night, the storm was beating the ridge so hard that loose snow hissed against the door like sand. Inside, Caleb slept through it. Ruth sat with her Bible closed in her lap, not reading, just listening. Patch lifted his head each time a gust struck the south wall, then lowered it again when the room stayed steady. Silas opened the ledger. Outside temperature, 38 below zero. Near the door, 54. Center room, 61. Heat wall, 65. Fuel for the day, 4 split logs. He looked at the numbers for a long time, not because they made him proud, because they made sense. Every crack repaired in June, every vent cut in July, every smoky failure in August, every damp patch corrected in October. All of it had been deposited here, not as memory, as warmth. Silas closed the ledger and put another kettle of water near the coals. Outside, the storm continued looking for an opening. Inside, it could not afford one. On the 6th day, Painted Coulee began to shrink into the places still barely warm. Nora Bale brought the children from the schoolhouse to the store, each child tied to the next with rope so no one vanished in the whiteout. Barnabas let them in through the back because the front door had frozen along the sill. Amos Pike arrived after dark with his family and a quilt over his youngest daughter's face. He did not mention the root cellar. No one did. Pride was a luxury now, and the room had none to spare. People huddled between barrels, listening to the stove settle lower and lower. Barnabas measured the last of the wood by sight and looked away before anyone saw his face. Eli Hask was there too, wrapped in buffalo hide, one blind eye clouded, but the other still sharp. Near midnight, he said what others had avoided. "Mercer is under that bank." Barnabas shook his head. No one could last in there. Eli looked toward the black windows. No one knows. That was worse than certainty. By dawn, the wind finally eased enough to travel in pairs. Not safely, only possible. Eli went first, with 2 younger men behind him carrying shovels and a rope line. They checked 2 claims along the west draw, one empty, one alive but nearly out of fuel. Then they turned toward the clay bank. The climb took longer than it should have. Snow had packed into the cut, hiding the path Silas had once made with a shovel and wheelbarrow. The men found the roofline only because the sod ridge formed a strange white swell against the hill. The house looked sealed. No smoke showed clearly from the chimney because the wind tore it away the moment it rose. No footprints, no movement in the narrow window. One of the young men crossed himself. Eli knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Then Patch barked, a hard, alive bark. The latch scraped, the door opened inward, warmth came out. Eli Hask stepped back as if the house itself had breathed on him. Silas stood in the doorway in shirt sleeves. Behind him, Ruth was slicing pan bread. Caleb sat at the table, drawing circles in spilled flour with one finger. A row of damp socks hung high near the ceiling, already steaming dry. The fire was not roaring. That disturbed Eli more than anything. A roar would have explained the warmth. There was no roar. Only coals, only stone, only heat that had not left. Eli took off one glove and pressed his bare palm to the wall near the hearth. The stone was warm, not hot, not freshly heated, warm in the deep, quiet way of something that had been holding heat for hours. Eli looked at Silas. Silas nodded toward the room. "Come in, shut it tight." Eli obeyed. For the rest of his life, he would remember that moment not as rescue, but as correction. The winter had not spared Silas. Silas had simply given it less to take. When Eli returned to the store, people did not believe him. They wanted to, but belief has a hard time changing direction when pride is frozen into it. A warm, buried house after 6 days of killing cold sounded like exaggeration. A house using a few logs sounded like a lie. Barnabas Vale, who trusted ledgers more than stories, went 2 days later with a thermometer tucked inside his coat. He did not go to admire, he went to measure. Silas let him. Morning reading. Outside, 26 below. Near the door, 52. Center room, 59. Heat wall, 64. Barnabas waited through midday, then into evening, until the fire had dropped again to coals. The numbers fell slowly, not suddenly, never below comfort for people dressed as frontier people dressed. Then Silas opened the black ledger. Months of entries, mortar tests, wind notes, fuel counts, moisture corrections, trial fires, overnight readings. For the 8 hardest days of the storm, the total wood use stood at 31 split logs. Amos Pike had burned more than 70, then furniture, then parts of his shed. Barnabas checked the math twice. The second time, his pencil stopped. Some truths enter a room quietly, then they leave no room for argument. Jasper Bell came after Barnabas. He did not bring a thermometer. He brought a carpenter's suspicion. He checked the sleeping wall for damp. He checked the rafters for rot. He smelled the corners for sour air. He opened the vent throat and watched the candle flame pull. He found no trapped smoke, no mold, no sweating stone. At the south corner, he stopped. The corner that had cracked in June stood firm. Jasper placed his hand there and left it a long time. Then he turned to Silas. "I warned you, right?" Silas waited. Jasper looked around the room. "But I judged you wrong." That was all. It was enough. By spring, the storm had become the year everyone measured other winters against. Snow left the draws in dirty layers. The road reappeared. Cattle bones surfaced in the coulees. Fence lines showed where men had guessed wrong about snow load and wind. And in Painted Coulee, people began building differently. Not all of them built stone houses. Most could not. Some had no stone. Some had no bank. Some had no time. But they had seen the principle. Amos Pike rebuilt the north side of his bunkhouse with a heavy masonry back behind the stove and a tighter entry that broke the wind before it reached the sleeping room. He no longer laughed while measuring. Nora Bale had a brick heat wall built inside the schoolhouse, not large, not pretty, but thick enough to hold warmth after the morning fire burned down. The children only knew that ink stopped thickening on her desk. Nora knew why. Barnabas Vale began stocking lime, stove thermometers, clay pipe, and rolls of felt for door seals. Men who had once asked for bigger stovepipes now asked how to stop heat from climbing straight out of the room. Jasper Bell changed his doors. Lower thresholds, tighter fits, better baffles. He still built in wood because wood was what the country offered most. But where he could, he married timber to mass, structure from one material, memory from another. That was the word people began using without meaning to. Memory. Not magic, not luck. Not a miracle dug into a hill. A wall that remembered the fire after the flame was gone. A floor that remembered the afternoon. An entrance that remembered the wind would try to steal from beneath it. The lesson spread because it did not belong to stone. It belonged to loss. For years, Painted Coulee had asked the same winter question. How much heat can a stove make? After the storm, the better question moved from house to house. How much heat can this place keep? Silas never gave a speech about it. He never corrected the nickname. The root cellar remained the root cellar. In summer, grass grew thick across its roof. In autumn, smoke rose low from its squat chimney. In winter, the doors stayed shut more often than open, because Silas had learned that warmth, like grief, could be wasted by talking too much. Caleb grew taller. Ruth's hands grew stiffer. Patch went gray around the muzzle and still chose the center of the floor. The cross above Mary's grave weathered silver, then leaned slightly east. Silas reset it every spring. Sometimes people passing on the road slowed and looked toward the half-buried house. They no longer laughed, not because Silas had beaten them in an argument. He had not argued. Not because the root cellar was beautiful. It was not. They stopped laughing because the storm had done what no man in Painted Coulee could do. It had tested every boast in the settlement, every stove, every wall, every wood pile, every proud assumption about what kept a family alive. And when winter reached the low stone house in the clay bank, it found a small fire, a quiet man, and walls that had learned how to hold on. The flame was never the miracle. The keeping was.